Good morning. I just want to tell you that I'll have to leave 5 minutes early because a friend of mine is having an 80th birthday at 12. So uh, we are invited virtually, and of course we have to change change gears. So it'll be 5 minutes early.
Yeah, well, that's good for us anyway, because we're our grandkids are coming over.
Oh,
Yeah, coming over around noon.
Yeah, around noon, so that'll be good for us.
okay. All right. Oh, hello, Margaret. Hello.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
It's okay. Okay, we're gonna start, and the theme for this week is Judaism and love, or love in general, and there are many facets to this under the rubric of love. Of course, there is the emotional aspects of love, and as you know, the word love appears in the Bible already in Exodus, in Genesis, and the love of the patriarchs for their wives and vice versa. And then there is a whole book in the Bible that is the Song of Songs, and it's composed of several poems between a shepherd and a shepherd, male and female shepherd, who sing these songs of love for each other. It's strange to find a book like that in the Bible. You know, one would think the Bible is concerned with issues of faith and so on. But the Bible, as you may know, is also concerned with issues down here on earth. It describes creation in a myth at the beginning, and mysteries in life, and miracles, and so on, and theophanies, which means God reaching out to individuals or to the whole people, like at Mount Sinai, but to the prophets, and so on, and the responses. So those are, of course, a critical factor in biblical literature. But there's also this component of love, and but the sages in rabbinic times, that means after the destruction of the Second Temple, and just to repeat it, the Second Temple was destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era. That means after the life of Jesus, basically. So the services in the temple ceased because there was no more temple. So the whole institution of prayer was instituted in a very formal way, with a fixed prayer book and a lot of other things that evolved during a period of several generations, but then became the standard for Jewish continuity. And among the things they did was to fix the canon of the Bible. The canon of the Bible is the Bible as we know, the Hebrew Bible, and it contains the Torah plus other books, the prophets, etc., and the writings. And the writings contain the book of Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs. And the rabbis debated at several meetings. We don't know exactly what happened in all those meetings because we don't have records, but it would have been fascinating to hear or to read the arguments, why this book made it and why this other book did not make it into the Bible. See, the Bible was created by the sages. The contents are attributed to other factors too, but who decided which books make it and which ones don't were the sages. And they decided, there was a whole discussion, and this we know from a short paragraph in the Talmud, discussion on the book of Songs of Songs. And some were opposed. Well, it's erotic, it's carnal love, descriptions of physical beauty. And Rabbi Akiva came with a deciding speech. And he ended the speech, and this is all we know, because we don't know the rest of the speeches. If all the books of the Bible are Kodesh, or sacred, then Shira Shirim, the Song of Songs, is the sacred of the sacred, or the most sacred. But the emphasis in Hebrew sounds even more prominent. And that won the day. But they reinterpret the descriptions of love for each other of the two shepherds as descriptions of love by God and Israel, the people Israel, the Jewish people. They describe their love in human terms. And so the traditional understanding of the Song of Songs is the love relationship with God, between God and the Jewish people, and vice versa. So, but anyway, we have very erotic passages there. So these are things that are part and parcel of the first stages, first steps in Jewish life. Even the stories of Abraham and Sarah, with nuances of love, and also using certain tricks in order to preserve their lives under the stress of being faced with an enemy king and so on. But that's an historical point of view. By the way, if you want to jump in with a comment or a question, please do at any time you want. It's not a monologue, okay? By all means. Love is a very important aspect in Judaism, as you can imagine. Harmony and...
I found this on the web.
Excuse me. I was looking at the materials for today, and the computer voice came out. Well, anyway, the issue of love is very important. Harmony between human beings is a deep concern in Jewish life, in the Torah, and in the Bible in general, and later rabbinic literature as well. Of course, there's a relationship with God, but then the main things happen between humans. And love and the formation of families and the reproduction of the people, the propagation of the Jewish people with the message of the one God, or monotheism, is very important as we follow in the stories from Genesis on. The propagation of the faith, augmenting in numbers, and also in the protection of the villages and cities in the region. A small group of people cannot defend themselves from the wild beasts, for example. So there is protection in numbers. And that was one of the reasons for the propagation of the faith. But that should be done within the boundaries of marriage. Now, so the first reason for intimacy and sexual relations or love relations between man and woman, or husband and wife, are for the propagation of the species. And we found that in the 7 blessings of under the chuppah, the 7 blessings of the wedding ceremony. But there are other reasons too for love, and that is the enjoyment of love. As you can see from the small literature that you were given, we have instincts, and this is manifest in all ways of life. We have appetites, we have hunger, and we have thirst, we have sexual impulses, we have mental and emotional needs. What distinguishes human beings from animals is that we discriminate in how we satisfy those needs. Most animals, have no limits, no scruples in a way. The dogs will eat as much as food as they're given and always want more. But humans have a way of limiting what we eat. And one of the reasons for kosher food is to limit that, to satisfy our desires, but do it in a consecrated way. Again, I stress the word consecrated, which means for one purpose. A thing is sacred when it is separate from the rest. Sabbath is sacred because it's a special day different from the other 6 days of the week. A building is consecrated because it's a synagogue or a church or place of study or even a cemetery, because it is not to be used for other purposes or common purposes. It's designated or consecrated for a special thing. And the ceremony of marriage is called kiddushin. Kiddushin is from the root kadosh, sacred. It's a sacred relation that sets aside both spouses for each other and limits the relationship, the love relationship between those two people. So the vow that a Jew takes, both in the original ceremony, the new husband tells the wife when he gives her a ring, "Arei at mekudeshet li betabad zo kedat Moshe ve'Israel." You are hereby mekudeshet, consecrated, kadosh, mekudeshet, kadosh, unto me by the laws of Moses and Israel, the laws of the Torah, and adopted by the Jewish people. When we say Israel, it's not the country. Israel is a synonym for the Jewish people in our tradition. It happens that the modern state of Israel adopted the same name for good reasons, but it gives room for sometimes for misinterpretation. So that's the vow that the male offers at the ceremony to his bride. That was enough, because in traditional Jewish ceremonies, the husband acquires a wife. I use that very, very carefully, but that's the word in Hebrew. A man acquires a wife. So you acquire a wife by giving her something of value, and that is a ring. It doesn't have to be a very expensive, it can be less, but something of value it passes hands from him to her at the ceremony. Today, the more liberal movements, including our movement, the conservative movement, which is a liberal movement, adopted a second part, that the woman will say to the husband, to her betrothed, the same words with different genders, of course. In Hebrew, the declension is separate for male or female, but anyway, the same formula or something similar to that, in order to have the equivalency, as much as equality as possible, even at the ceremony. So there is an exchange of rings in the modern ceremonies. But that is, the word is used, mekudeshet, consecrated. Consecrated in English from sacred, consecrated. And that is, if you will, exclusivity, to the exclusion of all others. And that is very important in Judaism. At one time, as we know from stories in the Bible, there was polygamy in Judaism. Abraham had more than one wife, and other patriarchs and so on. This was discontinued at different times in history for a variety of reasons. Not that it was prevalent. It was difficult enough in classic times to maintain one wife, because the breadwinner was, of course, the man. The woman minded the house, which was a big job, especially without the modern the things we have to cook or to preserve food and so on, or prepared foods already that you can buy, or help in washing and cleaning and so on. It was a full-time job to keep the house and to teach the little children and so on. But the breadwinner was in most cases the man. So it was not easy to sustain two households or more. But some did, but very few. We really don't have that many examples of polygamy. Kings, yes, because kings didn't have to mind many other things, but like King David or King Solomon and so on. But the general person or general family did not really have more than one wife. Polygamy of one woman having more than one husband is unheard of. But it might have occurred, we don't know. How did it change that to the point that today in the modern world, polygamy is totally forbidden in Judaism? Well, it came about at different times for different groups of the Jewish people. After the destruction of the Second Temple, what ensued was the rabbinic period, and the Jews, many Jews left the land of Israel for other areas. The bulk went to Babylonia, in the environs of what is today Baghdad, which was a prime area of civilization and not too far from the land of Israel. So a lot of Jews went to Babylonia, and that's why we have the Babylonian Talmud. Others stayed in the land of Israel, not in Jerusalem, which was destroyed, but in the Galil, in the upper Galilee, at different towns, and they had yeshivas or places of study and scholars also, and they eventually produced what is called the Jerusalem Talmud, or the Palestinian Talmud, from the land of Israel. But others went and migrated to different areas of what was then the Roman Empire, places in Europe and North Africa, Egypt, and further out to Morocco and so on, and the African North Shore, and then southern parts of Europe, Italy, southern France, what is today Spain and Portugal, and eventually further north, what is today Germany, Poland, and eventually England as well. This is a very, very brief summary, but in time, there were two main groups of Jews. The Northern European, that means Germany, what is Poland today, and the northern parts of France and so on, those were the Ashkenazi Jews. And the Jews in the southern part, especially the great, very large segment of Jews in Spain and Portugal that grew very fast in medieval times, those were the Sephardic Jews. These are very general terms. I mean, there are divisions within those as well. But so around the year 1000, the Jews in the north that lived under the influence of Christianity, mainly the Catholic Church, because it was before the Protestant revolutions. And in Christianity, polygamy was totally forbidden. So it would be very strange that a minority living in a country that was mainly Christian would have separate laws in that respect than the majority. So it was around the year 1000 that one of the great rabbis of the times issued a takana. A takana is an enactment with the signatures of 100 other rabbis of the times, of minor renown, forbidding polygamy in the Ashkenazi world. But it continued in the Sephardic world because the Sephardic Jews lived under Muslim-dominated territories. In Spain, in general, in those early days, and Northern Africa, the Middle East, and so on. So in the Muslim world, polygamy was allowed, up to this day, actually. And up to 4 brides a male could have. So it was not, the Jewish community did not have to bother with that. If families had more than one wife, it didn't stand out as an anomaly. So in the Sephardic world, it was not common. Again, I emphasize, not common, but it was not forbidden. until modern times, because there were some cases when, after the State of Israel came into being in 1948, exactly 73 years ago, that Jews came, say, from Morocco. And some families had more than one wife, and what to do. So the modern State of Israel does not allow polygamy. But in those early days, it would have been cruel to separate one branch of the family from the other and say, well, this wife can remain, but not this one, and so on, would have created a chaotic situation. And it was not that many cases. There were not that many cases. But each case was dealt separately and a solution was found. In other words, it was tolerated for that generation until, life did its thing and eventually disappeared. But it was an issue that had to be taken care of, and they did. But that's how it evolved in very, very broad strokes that I have described on how they dealt with polygamy. Now, are there any questions so far, or comments, or no? Okay. Now the issue is with sexual relations, and as you know from your readings, modesty is very important, and respect for the other person, for the partner in sexual relations. The readings are basically in consonance with the contemporary situation. We don't live in medieval times. We are aware of what our societies permit and don't permit, and so on. What are the mores, especially among the younger people. But while we know that there are different types of sexual relations, especially among the young, at different levels, and these will continue, some of those basic issues are very important. Modesty and respect for the other person, and also what the authors describe as, to me, monogamous. I mean, it's not to go and have meaningless relationships just to satisfy urges and appetites that the human being has. So a relationship, a premarital relationship, is not badly seen as it might have been generations ago, so far as it is done with respect and consideration between the partners for each other. And other issues are questions of prevention of conception. So, as the literature says, again, the commandment pru urbu, the commandment of being fruitful and to multiply, our tradition understood as a commandment given to the male. So they saw that if the male used devices to prevent pregnancies, that would be frowned upon. But the female could, because The female was not commanded as much as the male, with that commandment to be fruitful. So diaphragms and other devices used by the woman were tolerated or permitted. You know, these terms take different meaning. Eventually, I think most of the liberal movements tolerated also or allowed the use of condoms by the male in order to not only to prevent a pregnancy, but also to protect partners from venereal diseases or sexually transmitted diseases, which became a major issue, of course, all throughout history, but very importantly in the last part of the past century with sexual transmitted diseases, and which was a very, very important issue. So again, are there any questions? I'm probably saying a lot of things that you already know. And especially those who are not as young. Let me go through the, with regard to marriage, you know, love includes the whole section of marriage and divorce. Even in the Mishnah, which is the oldest code of Jewish law, compiled around the year 200 of the Common Era, before the whole Talmud was fully developed. So after the Bible, the Mishnah was the first code, in a way a code of Jewish life, prescriptions. And the whole of the 6 different areas of Jewish life, one was called Nashim, women, things that have to do with women, including marriage, including divorce, and other issues too. But these 2 are very important. So divorce was never forbidden in Judaism. Actually, there were some rabbis who were more lenient with divorce. Others tried to find a solution before the dissolution of the marriage for a variety of reasons. But divorce, unlike the Catholic Church, was an open possibility in all of Jewish life. The rabbis did not endorse it too much. They didn't say, well, make it easy for a divorce to take place. On the contrary, they tried to protect the family structure. But when they saw that it didn't work at all, well, go your separate ways. But there were other issues in a divorce. You know, the situation of the divorcee, the woman divorced, was always the weakest, as it is in many cases in modern times, though it's changing, thankfully, you know, with more women being in the working force and fending for themselves and so on. But in a classic society, before our century or before the end of the 20th century, when the breadwinner was almost exclusively the husband, if there was a divorce, the woman had a lot to lose, financially especially. So there are protective measures that the sages set in the even in the ceremony of a Jewish wedding. And what are these conditions? For example, there is the dowry. The dowry is what the woman received from her father or her parents at the day of the marriage. And that would be set aside for the woman. It was not necessarily part of the patrimony of the new husband. It was a type of protection in case of divorce. Also, the ketubah. The ketubah is the official writ of marriage, which we follow even today in contemporary Jewish weddings. The rabbi would read from the ketubah, and the ketubah is what they signed, and it's not really a poem of love and respect and so on. It is a document, a financial document. The ketubah mainly sets aside a sum of money a substantial sum of money for the protection of the woman in case of the death of her husband or in case of divorce. So this is a very interesting thing that even in antiquity, the Jewish leaders posited as something very important to protect the woman from those eventualities, and they happened. So more so, there are hundreds of midrashim, stories and comments of the rabbis in classic times regarding marriage and divorce. And we see that one important feature is that while they knew that divorce was possible, they tried to avoid it. As I said earlier, they tried to mend the fences and see if there was a way out, a compromise in order to save that marriage. And they even say that when there is a get is a writ of divorce, which has to be written. Even the heavens cry. Oh, God in heaven is crying, symbolically, because of the sadness of the moment. But also in issuing the rules for a get. Again, in English, you get a get. A couple gets a get. A get, or gitin, is a writ of divorce. While the writ of marriage is very simple. You can buy it in a Jewish bookstore. Some are very fancy, some are very simple. For a few dollars, you can buy and fill it in with the names and the dates and so on, and then signed by two witnesses, and that's it. If the ceremony takes place with two witnesses and the ring changes hands, that's it. For a divorce, you need to write it by hand. You need to write it in a special parchment with certain conditions in the first line and every line, and the names have to be very clear, and the place also, and not only include the town, but what is the nearest source of water, like if there's a river around or Lake Michigan is around, and several other details that tell us that they tried to make it difficult for a divorce to take place. Unless everything was lost and there was no hope, and so on. So divorce is allowed, not well seen. The leadership tried to avoid it. I'm sure in many cases the families tried to avoid it as well. But if it was a foregone conclusion that it wouldn't work, the path for a divorce was set. And with in each case, what the settlement was had to be discussed. But there was some protection for the woman. And the case of the children also varied. Yeah, Judy?
I have a question. Is it like in the Catholic Church where if you get married in the Catholic Church and you have to have an official Catholic divorce before you can get married in the Catholic Church again? Is it the same way in Judaism?
Yeah, it's not only a question of the church or the synagogue. It's a civil ceremony as well, in the presence of God. The Catholic Church, the main issue would be to annul the marriage, even if there are many children. But they annul the marriage lechatchila, using a Hebrew word, from the beginning. And what's the status of the children? It's also a problem. But this is how they work it out. It's not a fully clear way in the Catholic Church. In Judaism, no. We don't have that principle, what God has united, let no person put asunder, We don't have that. In Deuteronomy, there are laws of divorce. You find it, I think it's chapter 22 or 22, very clear that is permitted. So the divorce is from the point of view, it's a civil ceremony, but the traditional movements in Judaism, including our movement, the conservative, would not remarry a person who is divorced who has not gone through the process of acquiring a get. The Reform movement would do it because they say there's a divorce in the courts, that should be enough, which in a way, I don't fully disagree with that, because the laws of the country or the state of, say, Illinois, granted a divorce, that means that the family is technically totally separated. But we have that issue. And that is why many decades ago, 60 years ago or more, Professor Lieberman at the Jewish Theological Seminary introduced a clause, which is called the Lieberman Clause in a ketubah. Not in the Hebrew text or the Aramaic text, but in the English translation, there is a clause that says, in case of the dissolution of this marriage, both parties agree that they will seek the counsel of a rabbinic bet din or a rabbinic court in their place of dwelling, or else come to New York to the seminary and have the proper get issued. So that is the Lieberman Clause. And a lot of people use it in our movement if they use that ketubah. But if you go, say, to a Jewish bookstore now, a couple wants to get married, and today, for the last 20, 30 years, a lot of couples get those fancy ketubahs drawn by artists with calligraphy and so on. and and in the bookstore, I used to go to Rosenblum in Chicago or in the northern suburbs, and they had different categories. They had the traditional, then they had the reform, then they had a conservative with a Lieberman clause or without the Lieberman clause. So the drawings would be the same because they were experts in in graphic design, you know, but the artist had created a very beautiful painting and so on, but the text would vary. You know, the variations are simple. Basically, it's the matter is the same, you know, but getting married, but some would contain different things. And I would advise the couples to get it with the Lieberman clause,
Yeah.
because it would be easier in case of divorce, God forbid. But I always tell them at the ceremony, I would read part of the original, which is Aramaic mixed with Hebrew, and then a couple of paragraphs in English, but I would never read the Lieberman clause in public because it's a wedding. You don't read about the cases of divorce. But
We're gonna have to go look at ours and see if it's got that on it. It was just some printed, colored piece of paper. You know, I looked, it was even mimeographed, right? I mean,
No, I think it was printed.
it was not very pretty, I remember.
Yeah, well, they didn't do fancy.
it's several pages.
No,
It's a little
It
booklet.
was one side
it was like folded up.
folded up.
It was like a big piece of paper folded up.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
It was like a booklet, but
Like
it
a
was only
booklet.
one piece of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, then it's probably not, because the one issued by the seminary is like a little booklet with 4
Yeah,
pages.
that's just one piece of paper.
Yeah.
We got married in a conservative synagogue.
Yeah, I think the rabbi provided the ketubah.
Yeah, the rabbi provided the ketubah.
Yeah.
Well-
That was days before people went out and got fancy ones at the,
Right,
you know,
right.
at the
All right.
calligraphy.
Yeah, our son has one of those fancy ones.
I just ordered our fancy one. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, we got the really pretty fancy one that was like the artwork done. So
Yeah. Well, our son and daughter-in-law have it hanging in their living room.
yeah,
So
that's what we plan to do too. We already have a spot picked out for it.
Oh, very nice, very nice. When are you getting married? After the pandemic?
No, June 6th, actually. So it's
Oh.
coming up pretty quickly. Yeah. Rabbi Glick is marrying us. So
Very nice.
just had my mikvah last week. So
Yeah. Very nice, very nice.
yeah, I had one of those too, because I'm a convert.
yeah.
Okay, well, welcome then. So that's another issue regarding marriage and love and marriage. The other issue concerning marriage and divorce and so on is the case of the Aguna. Aguna is a woman whose husband has disappeared without giving her a get of divorce. Or sometimes hasn't disappeared, but for one reason or another doesn't want to give her a get unless he gets the children or unless he gets a big sum of money. You know, they use it as extortion. And that is the bad side in relations in Judaism. I mean, it happens in the regular courts too. You know, people bicker and the lawyers get rich because the parts don't want to settle. One wants to gain more from the other side, etc. So it happens in all types of cases. So there are cases, there were famous cases in New York State in which, especially in the very frum community, the very observant community, when the husband did not want to give the wife a get, even if they were living totally separate, unless he got a sum of money that he expected from her family. So things happen, you know? So that's why the Lieberman Clause is important, because then it avoids that type of thing. Now the case of the wife who is totally separated. She might even have had a divorce from the state courts, but does not get a get. In the traditional community, that woman is still married, according to Jewish law. And she's called an Aguna. She is tied to the husband, impeded from remarrying. Now, I'll tell you what our movement has done. Our movement has done the following. If they find the husband, and in today's world, we can find anybody, you know, and they insist that he gives her the get, but he doesn't, and they exhaust all types of ways of convincing him, then a bet din would be formed, a rabbinic tribunal with three components, three people, and they will issue a writ of divorce from the bet din for the woman to remarry. It's in our movement with quite a bit of sechel, you know, and understanding, but it's not universally applied in the very orthodox circles. So, but this is how we, a little more liberal movement, but still abiding by Jewish law, has tried to find a solution to this. And I've been in Chicago in a couple of cases like this, that we as a bet din issued a writ of divorce and allowed the woman to remarry over the years. But in other cases, there are other cases in which a woman is married and we cannot really find the husband because the husband went to war or went to defend the borders of the state of Israel and was most probably killed in a horrible way in which the bones were not identified. And it happened, unfortunately, during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The Israelis had conquered by that time, in the 6 years before and during the Six-Day War in 1967, the whole of the Sinai Peninsula, and they had built bunkers along the Suez Canal on the east side, because the other side was Egypt proper. So the Sinai Peninsula was occupied by Israel after that war. And they built bunkers and soldiers were there. And on Yom Kippur of 73, the Egyptians attacked those bunkers. And many soldiers, unfortunately, died inside, totally bombed and unrecognizable. And So what to do with their young wives? They were agunot, you know, in limbo, basically. They didn't have a husband. The husband was nowhere, because the rabbis thought, well, maybe he left the bunker and went to Japan, you know, whatever it is, and it has a hidden identity. But there was, to the credit of the chief Sephardic rabbi in Israel, Ovadia Yosef, at the time, during a period of several years, he dealt with hundreds of cases of agunot. I don't know, hundreds, but many dozens of cases, over 100 of cases of agunot after that very, very terrible war, and solved each one of them under the principles of strict Jewish law, but using a type of a moderate approach. He exhausted all ways of dealing with each event and solved the plight of these young women who not only had lost their husband and sometimes the father of their children, but also, you know, could not remarry, could not reorganize their lives, could not put some type of closure to that aspect. Because if they kept saying, you know, we don't know for sure if that person is dead, though the possibilities were very close to nil that they had survived. So there was always that door of hope, which was not really a valid one. So to the credit of that very, very extremist rabbi, the chief Sephardic rabbi, they solved the issue of these agunot. Okay, so, you know, in love, like in any other aspect of life, it's not only the love and the romance and the beautiful wedding, and the 6th of June will be a great day for you, Margaret, and but there are also the issues that people have to deal with, and the Jewish tradition has some response to them. So anyway, I again ask if there are some issues that you want to deal with. The first quote in the reading is a very famous quote that, as the author of that article says, it's always quoted, you know, of this rabbi who hid under the bed of his teacher. and you know, it's a real crazy story. Who knows if it's true or not? But the point that they wanted to make is that he was hiding and spying on his teacher while the teacher was trying to engage his wife in a sexual relationship, which was totally permitted, but from the point of view of modesty, it was an incredible, awesome thing to do, to spy on somebody else's relationship, unbeknownst to them. And some people may be exhibitionists, but this was not the case. And the response of the student was, Torai velilmod ani tzarich. It's Torah, and I have to learn everything from my Rabbi, even how to tie my shoelaces. So, which is an important principle, because everything is Torah in Jewish life. We don't have separate things regarding theology and then separate laws for business or in another section for family relationship. It's all Torah. You know, you look in the Torah, and I'm not saying something new, but in the Torah, you know, if you deal wrongly with people in business, if you treat your help in a shabby way, that's not being a good Jew. You have to deal with people in a good way in order to be a better human being and a better Jew. It doesn't have categories that separate. You know, I observe all the commandments. I pray 3 times a day, but then you take away the honorarium of the people that work for you. That's, yeah, that doesn't make you such a great person. So it's all under one package. Torah velilmod ani tzarich. It's Torah. Even sexual relations are important in Jewish life. And also, I would say, using a modern lens or a modern point of view, it tells us the need of sexual education. Because the student, who knows how old he was, but probably a mature person already, not a child, he needed to learn, and sexual education is very important. And of course, school systems try to supply with that. Though sometimes the students know more than what they're taught already. But it's important to teach and to teach the limits of the important aspects of relationships, especially for teenagers who think everything is okay. The issues of modesty and respect are very high on the Jewish agenda, not to take advantage of people. As we see in movies and in novels that describe situations with young people, how difficult it is for children, say in high schools or that age, because of the need not to be rejected or to be popular and so on and so forth. So they are sometimes compelled to do things that they wouldn't done otherwise. And there are others who take advantage of that. So a call for sex education is also an implication of that story, of the student hiding under the bed of the Rabbi to learn how to go about. And also the fact that the relationship doesn't have to be just a relationship to satisfy basic urges, but it has to have the component of love and respect and other important and good values to strengthen both components of a relationship. I don't know if I have left anything unclear. Yes, Johan, please unmute.
Could you?
It's all mute, but there's nothing playing.
Okay.
Okay. Could you speak a little about specifically the conservative movements? Because I've heard a lot of contradictory things about our movement's stance on this issue on like homosexual relations and homosexual marriage.
Oh, yes.
And like maybe tangential, but like just LGBTQ
Yes,
hierarchical acronym in general, those issues.
all the government, yeah. Well, the original text in the Bible is to disallow those relationships, homosexual relationships. But and many adhere to that, especially in the Orthodox camp. The liberal movements have done otherwise. In the conservative movement, we have a committee on Jewish law and standards that's been in place for 100 years. Of course, the members of that committee change. And in the last couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades, this was a prominent issue. And how does this committee operate? Somebody asks a question, and then 2 or 3 members of the committee would be assigned to write a short paper to vote to allow it or disallow it, or to whatever position they finally arrive at. And this issue of homosexual marriages or homosexuality in itself came up. And I would say that the bulk of the committee and also the majority of the movement has been in favor of allowing it. And the argument is that everybody is a human being. You know, we're fashioned, each one in a different way. I would say, you know, the famous story, and actually also in the Mishnah, in Sanhedrin, chapter 10, it says that compared the creation of human beings to the manufacture of coins. You know, a mint manufactures coins, and they all come out equal. You know, all the quarters look alike. Now, each state has different quarters, but they all come alike. You know, they're the same size, etc. But God mints human beings with the same mint, but they all come different from each other. We are all individuals, different from each other. And some are straight, some are homosexuals, and, you know, different varieties of gender preferences or needs. And so on the basis of that argument that we're all human beings, and we all are in need of love and gratification from a love relationship. So that is the point, that they disregard sort of the commandment against homosexuality. Actually, it's against male homosexualities. Actually, lesbianism is not decried in the Torah, but male is. I mean, it's a complicated argument, but basically the final point, the bottom line, is that there were 2 different papers that were in pro of authorizing homosexual marriages. Not the whole committee did not vote unanimously, but the vast majority voted in favor. And as in many cases, it is left to each rabbi to act according to his or her own mind. So if a rabbi doesn't want to officiate at this type of ceremony, then the couple can go to a different one. We've had many homosexuals in our congregation. I was never asked to officiate, so I never did. I think I did an aufruf in our synagogue, and I'm sure Ed remembers. I was already retired, but the incumbent rabbi was out of town, and I was asked because I knew the family and the young woman who was celebrating her forthcoming marriage to another woman. And I officiated that at West Suburban. The lady is a rabbi in her own right, so she had a few friends who officiated at the actual wedding. But I was committed to officiate at that time. So my point, my personal approach is of accepting. We have other members who come to the minyan, nobody makes any comments. A person read Torah on occasion, davened, even on Shabbat at several prayers, or even at the absence of the cantor. It was taken as a very, very civilized way and understanding way of our approach. So to answer a difficult question, Johan, it's the times have changed. I remember during those days when the president of Iran was Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. If you remember, maybe 6-8 years ago, there was a big conference. They all came for the United Nations annual celebration, in which all the heads of state came. Ahmadinejad was invited by Columbia University in New York, because the United Nations is in New York, to speak on this theme. And I'm an alumnus of Columbia University in New York. I got my doctorate there. And I was ashamed because they invited him. But freedom of speech is important. You know? But he declared that there were no homosexuals in the whole country of Iran, among the things he declared. Of course, it's a Muslim country, and Muslims, of course, the religion itself is against homosexuality. But they declared without any doubt, doesn't exist. Of course, one could read in the back of our minds, yeah, because they're no more because you killed them all, or they're still in the closet. But other people treat, and we know that in the Muslim world, in several countries, some more backward countries, it's still a very tough life for people who have to live with their sexual preferences being repressed. So in a way, Judaism is very open. Our movement has been open about it. The state of Israel, in spite of the recrimination of the Haredim and other groups, one of the things about the state of Israel that has the largest demonstration every year of lesbians and gays and so on, that group. It's the country that is most welcome in the whole of the Middle East. And it fits into the Jewish profile, the Jewish communities. The thing is respect for human life and people seeking to fulfill themselves in all our dimensions, including sexual and emotional. Okay, I think we're going to stop now, unless you have other questions or comments. Okay. Okay, your
Remember this
next
book,
what?
the Jewish
Oh.
wedding book?
Yeah, yes, there
Ah.
are. Yes, there are
My
quite a-
mother is Catholic. My mother
Yes.
is Catholic, and we offered to do the wedding ourselves because my mother is Catholic. She said, "Oh no, we'll do it." And she called us a few weeks later and said, "Did you know there are 3 kinds of synagogues?"
Yeah,
So we bought her this book.
We bought
Yeah.
2 copies.
We bought 2 copies. We bought one for us and we bought one for her. She said it was very helpful.
well, I'm
And that
sure,
was 50 years ago.
Yeah, that was 50 years ago.
yeah. Well, you're still happy and married. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, I wish everybody a good day. And I hope we can see each other in person soon.
Yeah, that would be
Cool.
nice.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Hello. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. I don't remember if I've met you.
No, you haven't. I'm Susan Downs.
Nice to meet you. I'm David
Nice
Schwartz.
to meet you.
How did you find this class?
Online. I'm interested in possibly converting, and somewhere in California directed me to you, which
Great.
I'm happy about because I'm in LaGrange Park, so it's much closer than California.
Yes. Fantastic. I don't think I have your email address then.
Should I
Yeah, put it in the
email
chat.
you?
That. Then I will. I can send you all the previous 6 class material from the previous 6 classes, and we'll get you going.
Excellent. Thank you.
Downs.susan.l@outlook.com. Next. Susan. So I'm the education director for Temple Har Zion in River Forest. And my specialty is answering small, silly, and stupid Jewish questions. But I can do big ones too. So I'll be in touch with you by email, but you should feel free to start asking questions
Thank you.
about things that you're curious about or want to learn, and I'd be happy to answer and help you find out more about what being Jewish is all about.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, today's class is about Passover. And I'm anticipating a mix of veterans, people who have been Jewish for a while, and people who are new to being Jewish. So I will try to hit both groups and try to make everybody feel like they've gotten something out of the experience of being here. But that just means that you should ask the other questions later or during class.
Yeah.
How do you spend your days, Susan?
I am a sales administrator at a company that makes conveyor belts and
Cool.
food packaging systems.
That's important. Like, you don't realize how much you need a conveyor belt until you're like, shoot, I need a conveyor belt. Where am I going to get one?
Right, exactly. Until you're in the middle of the coronavirus and you go, food supply chain problems.
Yes. This year must have been an interesting one for you.
Well, I had just started the job, and I want to say 2.5 weeks into it, we all went into lockdown. So
Oh, well.
it was bizarre, but in very educational.
Yes. I'm glad that you got at least 2 weeks with new people, with your new people
Sort
before
of
you.
learn the new job.
Yes.
Oh, jeez. Everybody knows who you are.
All right. Hey, Judy and Ed, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I guess we're not late, huh?
No, not yet. There's being relatively late and absolutely late.
Are we relatively late?
No,
No, you're relatively early and absolutely on time.
Yes, we were absolutely on time. Well, I was on.
Listen,
Hi.
Hi.
Hey,
Oh, so you got COVID hair too, huh?
the what?
You have COVID hair too.
You haven't gotten a haircut.
Oh, COVID hair. Yes, for sure.
Well,
I
I would be a mess if Judy hadn't trimmed it for me.
I used to, when we were first married, I used to cut his hair all the time, but when he grew a beard and got bald, it was much more difficult. I mean, like, I could cut your hair with no problems.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could. I cut
Oh.
my hair, for Pete's sakes.
really?
Yes.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh.
It was not easy to cut the back, believe me.
Yeah, well, this is the longest my hair's ever been.
Myself, it's trimming around the back and whatever. It's hard to do yourself.
Yeah, tell me about it.
welcome, Charles.
There's an advantage to having curly hair like yours.
Good morning.
You know, if it just sticks out, you cut off the piece that sticks out. So, yeah, it's real easy. Hi.
Hello.
So we put our names on the county website,
Yeah. Yeah, DuPage County.
DuPage County
to get-
website.
to get signed up for an appointment for COVID vaccine.
Ooh,
Awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, that's signed up. Well, I
Yeah.
like your pot.
Also, our the medical group, our doctor is supposed to said that they'll be letting us know. You know, we'll get a notification from them. I'm looking at Walgreens supposedly has a way to sign up, but I haven't found it yet.
I looked, I couldn't find it.
Yeah. If I find it, we'll sign up. We'll sign up with them to get notified for an appointment.
Anyway, and in the meantime, we got letters from the county wanting to know if we wanted to be election judges in April.
Oh,
I know.
really?
Well,
Yeah, I've been an election judge for 30 years.
Yeah, and I've been for 20 years.
And I haven't judged since Corona.
Yeah, neither have I. Well, I judged
The
last
first
the
time.
primary right when the lockdown started. You know, right when it was starting back in March.
And I was
Mhm.
Yeah, I did it. I said, you know, and that was the last time I did it. I didn't do it for the general election, and we didn't even go
We
to
didn't
vote
even
in
go there.
person. We voted by mail-in ballot for the general election.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see. If we get the
Vaccine.
vaccine, will work, but otherwise we're
Yeah.
not going to.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I'm putting off some routine follow-up medical stuff until after I get the vaccine. So it's not urgent. I mean, something you do once every 2 years, it can be 2.5.
Life has changed. So Bricks, is that her name?
Who?
Bricks?
Yes.
Oh, bricks, yeah.
She was on Face the Nation.
Oh.
I don't know, the CBS one this morning.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how things would come out of the White House that she didn't give them. He'd be having graphs around and it wasn't her graphs and she didn't approve of them. She was in a bad position.
Yeah. Hi, Ruby.
She was in a bad position.
Yeah.
And Fauci looks so happy now, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Well, all you had to do was watch the dynamics of those conferences several months ago, and you could read what was going on behind the scenes.
Oh, you can see his eyes rolling. Yeah.
I mean, that.
In the background.
Well, she was better.
Yeah.
She didn't roll her eyes. But
Well, I'm going to refrain from making political observations or commentaries. This is to avoid any sensibilities that might, one way or the other, might be bothered. So.
All right. So this is a good time to start talking about Passover. Welcome, Yochanan. So, welcome. Whether this is your first class or you've been here since the beginning, I'm glad that you're here. A special welcome to Susan, who's joining us. And we're going to get started. So, some of you, I'm guessing, have a lot of experience with Passover. Some of you have not so much experience with Passover. So we're going to go over some basics. We'll do some nuggets that might be new. And at 11:10, 11:15 or so, I will deal with the children because I'm also trying to run a Hebrew school. And so I'll help them get into their breakout rooms, and that'll be a chance for you to get up and stretch and schmooze. And then we will continue 11:20, 11:30, depends if all the madrichim show up and I have to work with any kids or not. But we will pick up after by 11:30-ish or so. So please stay on if you would like to keep going with us. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll do some basics now, and then we'll have a chance for you to talk about ask questions, and then if there's time, we'll go into deeper nuggets. So Passover, it's a Jewish holiday. That's, a very fundamental fact about Passover. Jewish holiday, it is in the Bible, in the Torah. Not all the holidays are, but this one is. It celebrates the Jews being rescued from Egypt by God through the agency of Moses and Aaron a little bit. It's also an agricultural holiday celebrating the wheat harvest. You make matzah out of the new wheat that has just been harvested for Passover. That's how I can keep straight whether it's the barley harvest or the wheat harvest. And it comes in the spring. And the fact that it has to be in the spring is why the Jewish calendar is not a strictly lunar calendar. Because if it were a strictly lunar calendar, then the holidays would move up by 11 days every year, as the Muslim calendar does. And eventually Passover would not be in the spring anymore. But the Torah says Passover has to be in the spring. So every 7 out of 19 years, which is roughly every 3-ish years, we add an extra month to make it a leap year, and we bump everything down so that Passover stays in the spring. I believe next year will be a leap year, so Passover will be, so starting with Purim, everything will be bumped down, but before that, everything will be up a little bit by 11 days. All right, questions so far about Passover? About the things I've just said? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next level of detail about Passover. So the Torah says multiple times that that you should be kind to the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Because of that, the rabbis wanted to make sure that there was a way for us to remember what it was like to be strangers in the land of Egypt and to remember the Passover story. That it's not just history for us, but it's memory. So in the Mishnah and fleshed out in the Talmud, they devised the Passover Seder, which they modeled after the Greco-Roman Symposium, because Passover is about celebrating being free, and the freest people in the world were the upper class of the Greek society and later the Roman society. And so just like they sat around and ate hors d'oeuvres and talked about important questions at their symposia, the Jews were like, we're going to do that too, but we're going to talk about like Jewish stuff. Specifically, what does it mean to be free? So, and we're going to lean when we drink because that's what they did. And in fact, that's why we lean to the left. The Talmud says it's because there's some concern about like windpipes and trachea and esophagi getting crossed and choking in wine. Probably it was actually because if you were a Roman and you were drunk and somebody said something to you that wasn't meant to be an insult, but you took to be an insult, you would want to have ready access to your sword. And since most people are right-handed, if you are leaning to the right, you can't get to your sword so easily. So if you are leaning to the left, then you can reach out your sword and avenge your honor. So this is probably why we actually lean to the left when we drink wine. So we have the Seder. Seder is a Hebrew word with a Hebrew root, just like English words have Latin and Greek roots, Hebrew words have Hebrew roots. So the Hebrew root, the three-letter Hebrew root is Samech Daled Resh, which means order. It's the same root as the word Siddur, which is a prayer book, because in a Siddur, prayers come in a certain order, and at the Seder, we do things in a certain order. There are 15 steps, or 14, depending on how you count them, to the Seder, and we will go through them after we hit some of these more basic things. One of the other things that the Torah says about Passover is that you're supposed to eat matzah on Passover. Matzah is a cracker, for all intents and purposes, made of flour and water. From the minute the flour touches the water, you have 18 minutes to get it in the oven. Otherwise, it is just a really expensive cracker and not good for Passover.
Isn't it 18 minutes until it's out of the oven, until it's completely done cooking, I believe? Or is that?
That is possible. In all honesty, I am drawing my knowledge on this from the children's book, The Mouse and the Matzah Factory. And the number 18 is mentioned, but I'm a little fuzzy.
I think it's cooked.
I think I've heard it was 18 from the time until the time it goes into the oven, but it doesn't spend very long in the oven.
No,
they cook very quickly.
All right, so we'll leave the question unresolved. In the Talmud, they would call this.
But isn't it also it's not supposed to touch water before the wheat and all that kind of?
Yeah, it can't have rained within a certain number of days of the wheat harvest and things like that.
Yeah. In the Talmud, they talk about these sorts of situations as teku, which is an abbreviation for we will leave it unresolved until Elijah comes and announces the Messiah and solves all of our unresolved questions. So I will declare this a teku question until I can consult the Rav Internet, Rav Google, Rabbi Google, and we will see what the internet has to say on this matter. And I'm sure it will probably have multiple answers, just like a good Jewish source. So we eat matzah, and we eat matzah instead of chametz. Chametz is leavened bread. Chametz is anything from the 5 browse grain: barley, rye, oats, wheat, and spelt. Also the same 5 grains that you can't eat if you're gluten intolerant. And browse is the way that I remember them. So any of those grains where there's been leavening happening, no good. So instead of chametz, we eat matzah. Now, the question is, why are we eating matzah? The Torah gives 2 different answers about matzah, and these are also reflected in the Haggadah. And I'll explain the Haggadah in a minute. The Torah says that we ate matzah during the first Passover, so the night of the 10th plague with the death of the firstborn. The Jews were supposed to have barbecue, basically, lamb barbecue. And they were supposed to eat their roast meat with bitter herbs and with matzah. So matzah was something that they ate kind of during slavery, before they'd left Egypt. The Torah later says that they ate matzah after they left Egypt because they left so quickly that they didn't have time for their bread to undergo the first rise. So they just stuck the dough on their backs and the sun baked it. These are not mutually exclusive, it should be pointed out. They could have done both. And matzah could therefore be the bread of freedom because we were on our way to freedom and then we were actually free when we ate it. The Haggadah is the book that we use when we do the Seder. Here's my favorite one, A Different Night. It's cheap, only $10-ish, complete, has transliteration and translation and readings and pictures. It's a good Haggadah. But there are many other good ones out there as well, and people make their own as well. I believe Ed is an expert on this. And with the advent of the internet, there are all sorts of resources for putting together a Haggadah. There is a joke: why do we have a Haggadah? So we can say the right words. So in the Haggadah, it says that it says 2 different things about matzah. One, it says that a certain rabbi, Rabban Gamliel, says that you have to talk about 3 different things, or it's as if you didn't do the Seder at all. It doesn't count. One of them is the Passover sacrifice. One of them is the bitter herbs, and one of them is matzah. And for each one of them, it gives an explanation why we have it, why we're talking about it. And for matzah, it says because we ate matzah when we left Egypt quickly. Earlier in the Haggadah, it says, halach ma'anya, this is the bread of poverty, de'achalu ahavtana, that our ancestors ate be'arad de'mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. So that seems to imply that matzah was this bread that we ate as slaves because we didn't have time for long, luxurious meals when we were slaves and had to go back to work quickly. So it was kind of like the ramen noodles of Egypt. You make it quickly and you go back to work. So you can take whatever explanation you like. Some people call this the bread of paradox because it could be either one. Some people say it's about changing your mindset. Do you see this as a bad thing or as a good thing? It's all in how you look at it. Cup half full, cup half empty sort of thing. And then people make all sorts of other explanations about why we eat matzah. Matzah's plain gets along with everybody, so we should get along with everybody. Matzah's not puffed up, so we shouldn't get puffed up and be arrogant. All sorts of various things. Like many things in Judaism, you have probably the actual reason why it started, you have the reason that is ascribed to it why it started, and then you have all these different layers of meaning that you can take from it, and they all coexist like a multi-layer cake, which is one of the wonderful things I love about Judaism, and people can add their own layers of meaning as well on top of it all. So, other things. So let's go into the Seder plate. My actual Seder plate is packed away with my Passover things because I have a lot of chametz, non-kosher Passover things out since we're still 2 months away, 9 weeks away. But I have here a pretend Seder plate. I suppose it would do in a pinch if I absolutely had to, then I could wash it, but this will do for now. It's a thing that you could color if you were so inclined. So on the Seder plate, we have a couple of things. We have parsley, karpas, which is a green vegetable, or a vegetable that grows in the ground, available during the springtime, such as potatoes. And so we eat parsley because it reminds us of spring and hope and rebirth and that sort of thing. We dip the parsley in salt water to remind us of the tears of the slaves. Next to that, hold on, I'm getting a text from my wife. And Judaism values shalom bayit, peace in the house, so I had better answer it. Okay. Next to that, we have the maror. The maror is a bitter herb, usually horseradish. Could be other things, but it's usually horseradish. People will either use the horseradish root itself and just take off a tiny bit of it, or they'll use the mushed up white horseradish, or they'll use the mushed up red horseradish, which is the white horseradish with beet juice, to make it slightly better. And we eat horseradish to remind us of the bitterness of slavery. One of the things it says in the Haggadah is Bechol dor vador chayav adam le'od etzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim. In every generation, a person should see themselves as if they left Egypt. And so by eating these different foods, it helps us to actually imagine ourselves as if we were there. Again, to turn history into memory. The next thing we have is the shank bone, the zroa. The shank bone is the shank bone represents the Passover offering in the temple. And that is because of the lamb that they ate when they were leaving Egypt. We also have the beitza, which is the roasted egg. And the roasted egg is because of the holiday offering that was offered in the temple. This is discussed in the Talmud, which is a collection of Jewish laws and various other things. There is the custom of daf yomi, of studying one page of Talmud every day, and then in 7.5 years, you'll get through the entire thing. And the daf yomi for today, or at least sometime this week, talks about this very matter. Talks about why they had to have the festival offering, because if you just went with the Passover offering when everybody was making pilgrimage to Jerusalem, there wouldn't be enough food for everybody. So if you have the festival offering, then all of a sudden you've got enough food for everybody. So that's a good thing to do. So we have that as well. Then we have the charoset. Charoset comes in different forms. The Ashkenazi version, Jews whose families come from Eastern and Central Europe, tends to be apples, walnuts, cinnamon, and grape juice or wine. The Sephardi version, these Jews whose families originally came from Spain and then went to the Middle East or other parts of Europe where they were welcome, tends to vary based off of what sorts of ingredients are locally available. So you can get, so some communities have dates and honey, some community, and then like ginger, and wine, or oranges, or banana, or cardamom. Like there's a wide range of different recipes. If you're interested, send me an email and I will send you my collection of charoset recipes from around the world. The charoset is supposed to represent the mortar that the Israelites used to put the bricks together. Personally, I think the Sephardic versions look more like mortar than the Ashkenazi versions, but you work with what you've got. Poland is not known for its date collection in a pre-globalization era, for instance. So you work with what you have. Then we have, so that's 5. If you have a Seder plate with 6 spots, the 6th spot is for Chazeret. Chazeret is there because there was a dispute between the rabbis about what exactly you're supposed to use for your bitter herb. And so they're like, fine, we'll just have both. So you can use, so Chazeret tends to be romaine lettuce, but you could use other bittery things as well if you so chose. Some people today also put an orange on the Seder plate. The orange on the Seder plate is because in the 1970s, the story goes that Susanna Heschel, the daughter of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with Dr. King, was in Florida speaking about why women should have full participation in Jewish ritual life, which was a big deal back in the 70s. I understand, I wasn't actually alive then. And so a man stood up in the audience and said, a woman belongs in the bima where prayer services are led, just like an orange belongs on the Seder plate. And so because of that story, people are like, yeah, let's put an orange on the Seder plate just to show that we believe in inclusion. Reportedly, the orange on the Seder plate may have actually had to do with LGBT inclusion instead of female inclusion. Either way, it's an innovation for inclusion. You're welcome to do it too. If you can get a clementine, they take up less space in the Seder plate, but you work with what you've got. Okay, questions about the Seder plate? Seeing none. 2 other customs that you should know of while we're talking about basics. During the Seder itself, one is that we take a piece of matzah, traditionally the middle one of the stack of 3, and we break it in half, and we hide half of it. And this is called the afikomen. Afikomen is from a Greek word which either means dessert or orgy. We go with the dessert translation. It is traditionally the last thing that you are supposed to taste. And the rabbi said that you have to eat the afikomen by midnight. This was their attempt to keep the Seder from going on too late. Seder still may end up going until 3 or 4 in the morning, but at least dinner has to be done by midnight. Keeps people from getting cranky and hungry. So, so you can't finish the Seder unless you have the afikomen, which has given an innovation opportunity for the afikomen to get stolen or hidden. And then often it is the children. Sometimes the children are the one doing the stealing and the adults are the ones finding, or they're not finding. Many different customs around this, but either way, there's a ransoming of the afikomen, usually preceded by a finding of the afikomen. And this is something that children look forward to. One of the many ways that we do things differently on Passover to keep kids engaged so that they'll ask, why is this night different from all other nights? Because questions are a good thing. So there's the afikomen. The other piece after that is that we open the door for Elijah. And we do this because in the biblical book of Malachi, it says that Elijah will come to announce the coming of the Messiah. And because Elijah, as a biblical prophet, was supposedly swept up to heaven by a fiery chariot and didn't actually die, therefore he gets this ability to come back alive. Also, this is why in Jewish folklore, Elijah tends to show up in various guises and like be super helpful because he didn't die supposedly, so he can do this. So we open the door for Elijah and we sing a song to Elijah and then we go back. It's a convenient 7th inning stretch. You get a little fresh air depending on how open you open the door. And people pour a cup of wine or grape juice for Elijah, welcoming him, sort of like the grown-up version of Santa Claus, except, you know, our Elijah goes around the world and gets wine. And does it 2 nights in a row. And some people have the custom that everybody pours a little bit of their own cup into the cup for Elijah, symbolizing the idea that we all contribute to bringing redemption. Some people also have a cup of water for Miriam. This is a more recent innovation because in the Bible, Miriam is associated with water. We first see her when she is watching her brother Moses by the Nile River. We later see her dancing with her timbrels after the Israelites have crossed the Sea of Reeds, aka the Red Sea, but probably not actually the Red Sea because that would put them in Saudi Arabia. Then when she dies, right after that, the Torah says, and there was no water. And the rabbis are like, must not be a coincidence. There must have been a mystical well that followed the Israelites around in honor of Miriam, and when she died, there was no water. Probably, actually, she was just a really gifted water finder in the desert. Some people are good at that. But either way, because there was no water, that's why Moses hit the rock and then didn't get to go into the land of Israel. So Miriam is associated with water. So some people will put out a Miriam's cup next to the Elijah's cup and fill it with water. Keeps her in the story. Okay, questions about all of that?
So these are all customs. There's nothing that's written as a specific obligation.
Biblically, the obligation is to eat matzah and not chametz for 7 days. Everything else is either a rabbinic law or is custom.
What about the idea of passing the story along and keeping the story alive? Is that
That's probably okay. It says, biblically, it says, when your child asks, you should tell them. So I guess biblically, if your kid doesn't ask, or if you don't have a kid, then you are off the hook on that one. But the rabbis say, well, if you don't have a kid, then you should ask each other. And if you're having a Seder by yourself, like some people did this year, then you should just tell yourself. Good question, Yochanan.
So is the Seder itself, like the full meal, is that like ordained by the rabbis in the top rabbinically, or is it just part of beautifying the commandment?
Good question.
Did the Torah reading not deal with that this week?
The Torah reading this week was about the first Passover.
Does not mention in there from generation to generation. And it's a holiday you celebrate each year on a specific date.
Oh, let's see. I believe, my memory is, and I'm going to look this up as I'm saying it, that it says, yes, you don't do work on the first day and the last day of the holiday, and you tell the story. Here we go. So, Exodus chapter 12, verses 24 through 27. You shall observe this as an institution for all time for you and your descendants. Unclear if this means the smearing the door of the blood on the door, which is what comes right before that, or just the holiday in general. And when you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as God has promised, you shall observe this rite. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, because God passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when God smote the Egyptians, but saved our houses.
Well, then it says you do it for each year. And if you have children, you have to tell them about it.
Yes. So it says that you keep Passover, but I'm guessing that, no, I'm not going to guess. I am confident that the Seder as we do it is developed in the Mishnah in the year 200,
right,
and is not what the Bible had any idea about.
Right, because that's all it says there. The rest of the how you celebrate it and those formalities are not defined there.
Right. So they would probably be. So I think, Yochanan, to your question, and then I need to start moving children around, and you guys can ruminate about more questions, because that's what Passover is about. There are pieces in the Seder that are rabbinic law, and everything else is custom added on top of that.
And the customs do not violate the laws.
Right. As long as your customs don't violate your laws, you can add more customs.
Interesting subtlety.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, it looks like the children have moved themselves for the minute, so I will talk about one more thing. Thank you, Justin, for that link.
That's Larry
yeah.
explaining the Seder, since he just passed yesterday, and it's a pretty fun little 5-minute video. Just
Awesome.
Great. So
thank you.
Yeah.
One more piece about this is the 4 questions, which have evolved over time. And if you want a whole long source sheet about that, that's a class I did last year, and can send you like how the 4 questions evolved. So email me afterwards. But the Mishnah says that you should prompt your child to ask these questions, And the modern version of the questions, which is similar to the Mishnaic version, is really one question and 4 answers. Why is this night different from all other nights? Because on this night, on all other nights, we eat chametz and matzah. Tonight we eat matzah. On all other nights, we eat all kinds of vegetables. Tonight we eat bitter herbs. On all other nights, we don't even dip once. Tonight we dip twice, parsley in the salt water and the maror in the charoset. And on all other nights, we eat sitting up. Why on this night do we recline? This leads, and the 4 questions in Hebrew are known as Manish Shana after the first 2 words. This leads to the story that some of you may have heard of, and some of you may not have heard, which is that there was a Jew who was going to be knighted by the Queen of England, and everybody is supposed to say a certain Latin phrase when they get knighted, when it's their turn. And the Jew practiced and he practiced and he practiced, and then everybody is kneeling and getting knighted and saying their phrase, and it's his turn, and he gets knighted and he's supposed to say his phrase, but he totally blanks. So he says the first non-English thing that he can think of, which is Mani Shana Halayla Hazeh Mikol Halaylot. And the queen turns to her advisors and says, why is this night different from all other nights? So you are welcome to take that with you to this Passover if you can remember it 9 weeks from now. And if you can't, just email me and I'll tell you. All right. So with that, I am going to take a break now because we're getting closer to 11:15. So I'm going to go on mute and you guys can schmooze amongst yourselves, and I'll be back at 11:30, if not before.
So speaking of why is this night different than any other night? Isn't the Kiddush blessing a different melody on that night? Does anybody know why? I'm
Kiddush blessing.
Lots of prayers have different melodies for different occasions and different holidays. The melodies you use in the morning service on Shabbat is different from the melodies you know, the weekday, during the week, and they have special melodies for the high holidays. So I assume it's something like that. As for that Manish Tana joke, it was old when I was a kid.
Yeah, he's never told it to us.
It was an old joke when I was a kid. So that's been around for a long time.
So what I want to know is what do I eat? Because I can't eat any of those things. They supposedly have oat stuff, but I can't eat the oats. So
yeah.
I have no matzah.
We have the gluten-free matzah, which is made out of tapioca flour.
Yeah, but it's not kosher.
It's not supposed to be.
Passover.
It's not supposedly fit for ritual purposes.
Yeah, although that's
it's legal to eat on Passover because it's kosher for Passover.
Yeah, it's kosher for Passover, but not.
Judy, so you can't, if you can't eat it, the matzah, the wheat matzah, because you're gluten intolerant, doesn't halakha permit you to eat the tapioca because you have no choice?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
They do make gluten-free oat matzah, but I can't eat oats either. So
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And also that.
And also, it tastes horrible.
It tastes like cardboard.
It's disgusting.
One time we got it and it wasn't baked right, and
yeah.
No, well.
And it's very, very, very expensive.
Yeah. Well, not
It's supposed to be bread of affliction. So.
Well, I mean, we usually have 30-something people for Passover, so we can afford.
It's a big enterprise.
Yeah.
It is.
Now, how did you do it last year? Did you do?
We
Zoom?
had a Zoom service.
A Zoom Seder.
We didn't eat together, but we had a Zoom Seder. But it turned out for Thanksgiving, we actually ate the same food. So I think maybe this year, since it's probably going to be the same way this year, I think maybe we'll do we had an exchange of food. There's one person in the family that lives kind of centrally. And so we met on her back porch and exchanged bags of food. So I think we're probably going to do that
Different
this year.
people made different dishes and we exchanged.
Yeah. So last year we just everybody we made a Haggadah, then we sent it to everybody, and they printed it or looked at it on their iPads or whatever. And I was touched because there's a lot of people that go to our seders that are not Jewish, and they all made an effort to get matzah and to make haroset and
And get
and
horseradish.
make little seder plates. It was lovely. It was absolutely lovely. And I was expecting it to be horrible because we've done it. We've been married 50 years. And except for the 1 year when we went to New York, we've had a seder every year, including the year before we got married. So last year would have been our 50th. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 50, yeah,
50th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was all set to be really upset by it, but it was lovely.
It was lovely, yeah. And we had some,
And we didn't have to rearrange the living room and the dining room to have everybody sit down at the table. It was lovely.
and we had some
Different sort of preparation.
Yeah, the preparation was a lot easier. A lot easier.
Well, I think we'll do this year what we did for
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving,
yeah.
which is the exchanging
Food.
right?
Yeah, we'll do that this year.
But the Passover came right at the beginning of the quarantine, so we hadn't had a chance to work out all those kind of details in advance.
Who do you usually have do your 4 questions? Do you have children around?
We use whoever's the youngest. Our grandson will be 15.
Yeah.
Most of the little kids aren't Jewish, although one of the little kids learned it.
Yeah.
One of the non-Jewish little
But
kids.
she's not that little anymore. She's 10 or 11 now.
Yeah, she learned it, which I thought in Hebrew, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, whoever's the youngest does it.
And we have a Passover story that we got when we did our first Seder. It was from, I think it was Barton's Candy Company.
Barton's Candy Company. Yeah.
Had a folder of recipes for Passover, and on the back of it had this children's
No, it
version.
was a separate page because it was on both sides of the page.
No, it was not on both sides. It was on a big fold-out sheet,
Okay.
and it was a children's version of the Passover story. And what we've done for 50 years is we pass it around. We made copies of it. Obviously, they already done the original wouldn't have lasted that long, and we pass it around, and everybody sort of reads a couple of sentences.
It works pretty well. Anyway, what did you guys do?
You mean last year?
Yeah.
I
Oh, we
attended.
were-
Oh, sorry, Charles. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I attended Alan's Zoom Seder, so that was fun. So,
Yeah, that's not one nice thing about Zoom Seders is like we had Ed's cousins from both coasts
yeah.
at our Zoom Seder, which
Mhm.
they've never been to our Seder before.
Right.
So at the end of the Seder, we said next year in Elmhurst.
Yeah.
So maybe one or another of them will come next year. Next year.
Hopefully. Oh, okay. Well,
Not this year, next year.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what were you going to say, Charles?
No, I was just going to say that because we were making use of Zoom last year, and so the family is scattered across the country, then we each celebrated on our own. But Zoom might be an option this year. I have to consider that.
The service part of it went super well on Zoom, super well. We haven't managed to eat a meal on Zoom.
Right. No.
We have eaten meals on Facebook with three people, but
Yeah.
I don't
You
think
can't do it
you
both.
can't eat a meal
Right.
on Zoom.
With 20 people now.
No.
You know,
That's-
what we do, maybe we've been practicing every Friday evening, we're on Zoom to light the candles and bless the wine and the bread. And then we spend about 45 minutes together on Zoom and go through that. And I was really touched to see that it was my son who initiated that and is the driving force behind that, because he has apparently that's become important to him in a way that it wasn't before. So, and at his age, as he's adult, and it's his birthday today, but
Happy birthday.
you know, at our ages now, they're well into being mature adults. So it was interesting that he was returning to some observance that, and it was important for him to do that with the whole family. So maybe we can build on that for this Passover.
Yeah, in fact, that's why this is sitting on our table, because my daughter has a full-size iPad.
And it makes a good
And
stand.
this is how we do our meals together.
Yeah. We usually on Saturday have dinner with my son and daughter-in-law on the
table.
video conference.
Yeah. Well, I have a weekly Saturday afternoon discussion with my eldest grandson, and we discuss all sorts of things, including, some aspects of, some of his Hebrew school activities. So this is something. That's what I like about Zoom.
Oh, that's really special when you can do things with your grandchildren like that. When my two grandsons were preparing for their bar mitzvahs, I would spend time with them several days a week, either on telephone or on video chat, helping them learn their prayers and their readings, the Haftarah and the Torah portion. And it was a good bonding experience.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't have those skills that I can teach them, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Well, he learned.
Yeah.
Because when our granddaughter did it, he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But between
There's a lot
her
of good YouTube videos for learning those kinds of things too. If you're
What?
YouTube videos.
How did I learn? I mostly
He started,
I got recordings from Cantor Figa and he has them all.
I see.
and for the last some 10 years he's been doing
I've started doing Haftarah readings during Saturday morning. I did the Haftarah yesterday morning, and it's one I've done before. So
No, I came off very well yesterday. I should say, it sounded like you were a professional doing it.
well, I've done this one several times. So
and he practices every day.
yeah, I started practicing a few weeks ago, so I fluid in it.
Yeah, so now he knows how to read the tropes. Is that what they're called?
Yeah. And
our granddaughter went to the woman who is the wife of the rabbi in
the
Chabad
Chabad rabbi in
Naperville
for tutoring.
But she couldn't tutor her in her Haftorah because women aren't allowed.
So she did tutor on just general Hebrew,
just how to read Hebrew
and some of the prayers. And
yeah.
Well,
she couldn't come to her bat mitzvah either.
Yeah. Well, I think mostly, well, for one thing, she wouldn't drive on.
No, that's right. She wouldn't drive on Saturday.
Shabbat. Yeah, I think that was more it than anything else. It would involve driving on Shabbat. So but also Raina was much better at learning the stuff on her own than the boys were.
that sounds about normal.
Yeah. She's both a girl and the firstborn, so
yeah.
They'll both are involved in that.
Yeah.
So how did everybody else's seders go? Justin?
Pretty good, actually. So since we did it on Zoom, the first night we did it with Adrian's family. And so we were able to get her grandmother in on it. And then, her aunt and uncle that live in California. And it was really cool to get like everybody together. So that was like really awesome. And then on my side of the family, They haven't done a Seder before, so it was nice on the second night to kind of do one with them and kind of teach them how to do it with something that we probably, wouldn't have been able to do. So it was really nice. And, I think it worked out pretty well.
I think in the future, we're going to have a place and a computer. I think that would be nice.
Yeah.
Don't you think that would be nice?
Yeah.
We've done that actually. The Sunday dinner, there's one Sunday dinner person who lives out in Portland. And occasionally we would have an iPad sitting on the table so that she could participate in the Sunday dinners.
Yeah.
Not
In the before time.
in the before time, yeah.
Well, I would hope they kind of do something like that for classes whenever we can start having classes, in person again, because I think that's been
They're going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the temple is going to make sure that Zoom is involved in everything going forward, even when we can go back together. Because it honestly, we don't live that far, but to take the half hour to drive there and the half hour to drive back home.
Also, we've got now people who've been joining in from all over.
Yeah.
We got one couple who recently joined who live out in Oregon, I think they said. No, Colorado. They live in Colorado. So, and they recently joined our synagogue because they like their online services.
Yeah, we've been doing Pirkei Avot, and I've been loving the class. And I feel like, some of the times I'm out in rural Illinois, and the only reason I can do it is because it's on Zoom. So,
yeah.
So what do you do that you're out in rural Illinois?
So I work for the railroad.
Do you? He's a railroad goof.
Which railroad?
BNSF.
We actually I used to take that. I used to commute on the Burlington.
Well, now it's Metro, but that was in the old days when they
It was Burlington. It was Burlington.
Well, yeah, that would be
Still our lines. It's just the Metro uses.
But when I took it, it was the Burlington with the green locomotives and Burlington Northern. And in fact, I was on the train after a train that ran into somebody once.
Well, I was on a train that ran into somebody once.
3-hour delay.
No, it was interesting. We lived in Aurora, which is the end of the line.
Yep.
Yeah, and so all the people who work on it, the conductors and stuff, are all standing there when the train goes, so you get to talk to them, and they were so devastated. It was very interesting.
The town Eola, I guess.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure. We used to live in Aurora. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you know what Eola stands for? It actually stands for something.
No,
Wow.
what does it stand for?
It stands for End of Line Aurora.
It's
We lived in Aurora at the time.
Yeah,
Obviously, if I took the
I
train
didn't
to
know
Aurora.
that one. I knew that there's a town in California that's Coalinga, Coalinga, and the reason it's Coalinga, it was a coaling station on the railroad, coaling station A.
Okay.
Coaling.
Oh, that's like what is it? Noah? No, some town in Alaska has a name like that.
Nome.
Nome, Alaska, right?
No name.
No name, right? Nome, Alaska.
Well, the college I went to, or university I went to, it's called College Station because that's where the railroad went to. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a little more obvious than Eola and Coalinga.
Before we were married, he drove me out to the Illinois Railroad Museum back when it was just the dirt. There was nothing there, although you could walk through all the trains, and we got to walk through the
Nebraska
Zephyr, which was really cool. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go. It's going to be boring. It's going to be horrible. And blah, blah. And I just absolutely loved it. And we go, well, except for this year, we go every year. And he's a member.
Yeah, we're a member. Family membership.
It's a family membership, right? We're members. If you haven't ever gone to the Illinois Railroad Museum,
it's fascinating.
you have to go there. I mean, it is amazing.
That's for sure.
We went to the one
Yeah,
in
we've been to a few
Denver,
others in
and-
Golden.
I used to work in
Golden.
Denver, so I used to.
It's not nearly as, I mean, it's a really nice one, and it's not nearly as nice as Illinois Railroad
Oh,
Museum.
that-
But one thing that they did have, which I really liked, is they had docents. And like we went to this one talk about being a signal
Brakeman.
brakeman.
Yeah.
Well, apparently being a brakeman was a very dangerous job. People
Yeah.
got killed all the time being brakemen.
Mm.
And I had no idea.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Right.
So Illinois Railroad Museum should do that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Nice. But yeah, so I often, have to be out and about, out in rural Illinois. My territory goes basically from Aurora all the way out to Dubuque, maybe a little bit into Wisconsin and whatnot. So
You must put a lot of miles on your car.
I do have a work vehicle, but yeah, I do. I do end up doing that.
Yeah, Ed's uncle used to sell Columbia macaroni,
Yeah, he used to. Yeah,
and he would put hundreds of thousands of miles on his car every year.
He was, like Death of a Salesman, that kind of a
Yeah,
salesman.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
man.
Except for he did a good job the whole time.
Yeah, and he would drive all around. He lived in New York, and he would drive all the way upstate New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts, and
Used to
driving
keep us in macaroni
Yeah,
before I found
samples,
out I
yeah.
couldn't eat it.
Yeah. Well, he's been gone for a number.
Yeah, he's been dead for many, many years.
Yeah.
But he was a nice guy. Nice guy. Yeah.
And Charles, you were an engineer for that worked all over the world, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, mostly in South America, Latin America. I've been out to Vietnam and Singapore a few times, and of course in the States, but different types of engineering work.
Are you a P? Are you
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I studied at Illinois Tech and then went down. I was civil engineering and I started working different places in the Peace Corps for a few years, and in Chile, I was doing irrigation projects, and it was doing urban planning and development for an agency in Costa Rica. And then I just stayed on there for about 20 years and was doing a little bit of everything, some industrial work and housing projects, worked on what was now the presidential office buildings there, and some other things. And then I came back up to the States, and then I was working in, which was then House Engineering, but it was a global company. And then it was combined. Then I was doing trade finance to improve water and sewage infrastructure in Venezuela, and some work in the Dominican Republic. And after a while, I was doing other things in public works and municipalities. And for about 10 years, until about 3 years ago, I was doing work on pipelines, specialized services for pipelines in the States, and then in Peru and Bolivia, and did some work in Trinidad, Tobago, and Mexico. So, yeah. And those two jobs out in Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh City for some water lines. So, yeah. So I've been around.
Yeah. How did you get involved in that?
Huh?
How did you get involved? Did you just apply for the Peace Corps, I guess? Is that?
Yeah. Well, I was studying, and I said, what am I going to do with myself? And I became involved in Latin America because I made some friends from Latin America when I was studying. One of my roommates was from Costa Rica, and so they stimulated a bit of interest. And I said, I'm graduating, and born and raised in Chicago, I hadn't traveled much. And I said, let me do something that can help folks and maybe see what else is out there. That was essentially my motivation.
Nice.
So you work in engineering as well with the railroads?
Yeah, so I'm in the signal department. I studied electrical engineering.
Yeah. Okay.
Our son was is in theory an electrical engineer too.
Yeah.
Although he does computers, yeah. And our granddaughter is a junior in college for chemical engineering. And Ed and I were both, hard scientists, and we were like, okay, where did we go wrong? All these engineers.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience. Lots of high school drama to deal with.
Yeah.
So let's do a run through the Seder, a quick tour guided approach. On your window as we go flying past, you will see this, and on the left, you'll see that. And then we can get to your questions. So the first step of the Seder is Kadesh. Kadesh is where we say Kiddush over the grape juice of the wine. It comes from the root Kuf Daled Shin, which means holy. So we are saying, just like we say on Shabbat, we're saying for Passover, this time is now holy. It is different and special and not the same as the rest of the year. So we start with Kiddush, and that is the first of 4 cups of wine or grape juice that appear throughout the Seder. The next step is Orchatz, where we wash our hands without a blessing. We're washing our hands because we're going to eat, but there's no blessing because we're not eating bread.
And is that that one is the optional one that takes it from like 14 to 15 steps? Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
It's not that there's a step that's optional. It's about whether or not you count them as separate steps. And that comes later. I will try to remember to explain that when we get there. The next step is Karpas. That's step number 3. That is dipping the green vegetable, usually the parsley. Be careful that you can tell the difference between parsley and cilantro when you're buying it at the store, because otherwise you'll be surprised. I made that mistake once. So dipping the green vegetable in the salt water. There's a Sephardic custom to use lemon juice instead of salt water, but the pretty common one is salt water.
Does it have to be parsley? Because
No.
what we do is we buy all kinds of green herbs, parsley, chives, chive flowers, which look really pretty, and cilantro, and we put them in cups all over the table so everybody can pull out whatever they want.
Yeah, it does not have to be parsley. Parsley is most common, but as long as it grows in the ground and hits that blessing, then you can use it. In Eastern Europe, people use potatoes because they were cheap and had the right blessing.
My mother's parents used potatoes. My father's family used pieces of onion. And so we always had both potatoes and onions at our Seders.
Cool.
We don't use either. We don't use either.
After this Seder tip, it is helpful to bring out like vegetable hors d'oeuvres because this keeps people from getting hungry and cranky until you get to dinner. And you've said the blessing, so you can do so. The next step is Yachatz. Yachatz is breaking the middle matzah. I like to think of this as if you held the middle matzah in your left hand and raised your right hand and went Hi Yachatz. You don't actually do that, but that is how I remember that is what that step is for. One of the halves gets wrapped in a napkin and then gets hidden or stolen, depending on your custom. The trick is to do it in such a way that anybody who might be finding it does not notice. The next step is Magid. Magid is telling the story, and this is where the highlights are. It is the longest section of the Haggadah and the second longest section of the Seder, surpassed only by dinner. So This is where I have to consult the actual Haggadah because I do not remember the order of the highlights of Magid. So we start off with Halach Ma'anya. This is the bread of affliction. And we say, let all who are hungry come and eat. In that, then we go to the 4 questions. Then we have the 4 children. Banim could be translated as the 4 sons or the 4 children. So the 4 children are the wise one, the wicked one, the simple one, and the one who does not know how to ask. Note that even the wicked one is still at the table at least. One of the things that I love about this Haggadah, A Different Night, compact or non-compact edition, is that it has different artworks throughout the centuries of the 4 children. This is them as playing cards, an Israeli one, a German one. This is the 4 children in all of us from the Rabbinical Assembly Haggadah, that each of us has all of them. This is claymation. These are books, the open one, the blank one, the closed one, the one on fire. You can come up with at least 3 different interpretations of this one, which one is which. There are the Marx Brothers. Yeah, so lots of fun things that you can do with that. One of the highlights of this Haggadah for me. There's also a song, the Ballad of the 4 Sons. Such to Clementine, said the father to his children, at the Seder you will dine. You will drink your 4 cups of matzah. You will eat your fill of matzah. You will drink 4 cups of wine. That was written, it's not always attributed, but it was written by Ben Aronin, who is a Chicagoland Jewish educator, worked at Anshe Emet, and happens to be the great uncle of my wife. But that is a fun addition to the Seder, and I was using it for years before I even met my wife. So if you don't know the Ballad of the 4 Sons, I highly encourage you investigating it. It is a much faster and more enjoyable way of going through the 4 children. We have a note. Yes. Ruby had a note about using a faster version of the Seder. When I was in Hillel at Wash U, we had different Seder options, and one of them was the Speedy Seder, known as In and Out of Egypt Quick. I was put in charge of that, and one year I got it down to 2 hours, including dinner. And ever since then, I've had no patience for really, really long Seders since then. Now that I have a small child, I continue to use my skills. Yeah, Seders don't have to go on forever. And when they do, it's often because of the talking. And Ruby has a note that there's a 30-minute Seder book, which is very nice. And although I don't know it, I'm sure it is. So the things that I'm mentioning are the ones that would be in the 30-minute Seder book, because these are the bare bones that you have to say. Then there's some midrash, which you could totally skip. It takes 4 verses and blows them up with commentary and dissects every word, and is interesting, but not really necessary. Then we have the 10 plagues, blood, frogs. Some people translate kinim as lice. No, that one's lice. The 4th one, arov, some people translate as wild beasts, some translate it as swarms of insects. Take your pick. Cattle disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and death of the firstborn. There's a custom that for each of these, we dip our pinky or our spoon into the cup. We're on the 2nd cup now of wine, and we put out a drop onto our plate or a napkin. We are diminishing our joy because of the suffering of others. A full cup of wine is a full cup of joy. Try to remember not to lick your finger or your spoon thereafter, because then you're deriving pleasure from others' pain. Although that does lead to another question, another joke, which is, what do you call someone who enjoys eating the bread of affliction? A masochist. So, take that for what it's worth. Then we have dayenu. Dayenu means it would have been enough, from the Hebrew word day, which is enough, and nu, which is us. And occasionally you will see Israeli parents scolding misbehaving children in supermarkets, saying "die," which means enough, and they get weird looks from everybody because everybody thinks that the parents telling their children to actually die. But yes, so Dayenu, it would have been enough for us. It's a really long song, but there's the short version, which says that if God had if God had taken us out of Egypt, that would have been enough. If God had given us Shabbat, that would have been enough. If God had given us the Torah, that would have been enough. But God did all these other things. How much more so should we be grateful? Judaism is big on having an attitude of gratitude. Then we have Rabban Gamliel, who said you have to talk about Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, the matzah, and the maror, or doesn't matter how long your Seder was, it didn't count. Then we have, in every generation, a person should see themselves as if they left Egypt. And then we have the beginning of Hallel, which is a set of Psalms. We have Psalms 113 and 114, and then we move along to the second cup. And that is the end of Magid. After that, we have Rachatza, which is washing the hands with a blessing. Some people, to speed things up, they do Orchatz as a ceremonial washing where just the leader washes on behalf of everybody, and Rachatza everybody washes. You can all get up. You can bring a bowl and water and a towel around to everybody. If everybody gets up, that is a great time to hide the afikomen. But you do it as you need. Then we have Motzi Matzah. This is the 14 or 15 because it depends if you think these are one step or two. But you do them you do all of it either way. Motzi is where you say the motzi, the blessing over bread. Matzah is where you say the blessing over eating matzah. It is something that we are commanded to do in the Torah, so it has the Asher Kitzam b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu phrase in it, in that blessing. Ditto with maror, we eat the bitter herbs. We dip them in charoset for that. Then we have korech, which is the Hillel sandwich. Hillel was the rabbi who lived around the year 1, both years 1, they're right next to each other. So his sandwich predates the Earl of Sandwich. And the Earl of Sandwich invented his in the time of King George III. So 300 years ago versus 2,000 years ago. And the Hillel sandwich is matzah, maror, and charoset, replacing the matzah, maror, and roast lamb of the original Passover meal. Then we have the shortest part of the Haggadah, longest part of the Seder, which is Shulchan Aruch, eat the meal. And then we move on to Tzafun, which is finding the Afikomen. Barech, where we say thank you to God. Generally, in Judaism, we have short blessings before we eat, long blessings after, because you can sit around longer after you're full. So we do that. The very short version of that is hubba, 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 thank you for the grubba, yay, God. But there are longer versions in Hebrew as well, and that's what you will actually find in the Haggadah. Then we have the third cup, then the cup of Elijah. Some people also do Shvoch Chamatcha, which is where you open your door or don't open your door and ask God to pour out your wrath on everybody else, on the people who oppressed us. Not really safe to do with your door open, so people tend to do that with their door closed, and then even if they are speaking Hebrew, and then do Eliyahu Hanavi, welcoming Elijah with the door open. Then we move to Hallel, where we sing more psalms. I'm consulting the Haggadah because my memory gets a little fuzzy as to what exactly goes into which step at this point. Then we have the fourth cup. Then if you are outside the land of Israel, there is the custom of the second Seder. And this is because for a long time, Jewish months were decided based off of witness accounts coming to the temple or to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem and saying, two people saying we saw a new moon. And then just like they did in The Lord of the Rings, fires would be set, signal fires, and instead of going across New Zealand, they would go across the land of Israel to Babylonia, saying there's a new moon. And outside of the land of Israel, nobody was really sure if they got the news on the right date or not. So they decided that we better make most holidays not Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av. Most other holidays should be a 2-day holiday. Just in case we're wrong one of the days, we'll be right the other day. So on the second day of Passover, if you're not in the land of Israel or Reform, you're still having a second Seder. Either way, you are starting to count the Omer, which is counting 7 weeks per what it says in the Bible until the holiday of Shavuot. And the Omer is a bushel, basically. It's a measure of wheat, of barley, well, a measure of grain. But you bring your first Omer, your first bushel of grain, of barley, to the temple as a way of saying thank you to God for having a good harvest. And also this way the priests get to eat because they don't actually have any land. So we count the Omer, then we sing some songs. We're in Nirtza now, which is the last section. There's a song called Adir Hu, which is an alphabetical acrostic about how great God is. There's Echad Miyodea, who knows one, which is numbers 1 through 13, and something Jewish associated with each of them. Some people have the custom to, with this one, to try to do each answer in one breath. So who knows one? I know one is the Lord of God in heaven and on earth. All right, that's pretty easy. But by the time you get all the way up to 13, who knows 13? I know 13. And then you try to do it all in one breath. Easier in English, also easier if you're standing up. Harder if somebody is trying to distract you. I speak from personal experience here. Then we have Chad Gadya, which is another one of these house that Jack built, building on itself sort of thing, where Chad Gadya, just an only goat my father bought for 2 zuzim, which are like ancient currency. Chad Gadya, an only goat. And then we have a lot of things. Oh, there's a cat right there. Speaking of cats, that cat does not look quite big enough to eat a goat, but that is theoretically what happens in the next verse. The cat eats the goat, then the dog bites the cat, then the stick hits the dog, the fire burns the stick, the water quenches the fire, the ox drinks the water, the slaughter kills the ox, the angel of death kills the slaughter, and God beats everybody. And this is actually a historical reference. The goat are the Jewish people. Our father would be God. 2 zuzim are the 2 tablets. And then all of the other things are world empires that beat up on each other and also beat up on the Jews. And then we have hope that God wins. The songs at the end are particularly fun when it is late at night and you're kind of loopy. They were even more fun when they were written because wine was not diluted back then. And so drinking 4 cups of super strong wine late at night and then trying to sing these songs, really fun. But now we have normal size wine and we just have our fun as we have it today. All right, so that is the Haggadah. What questions are there? questions about the Haggadah or just pass over things you want to know in the last 5 minutes.
So are all these songs part of what is obligatory, or are those abbreviated? Many places, many seders I've attended have not been that complete after dinner, after saying grace.
Yeah.
Things that have built up over the years.
So the songs are old. There's one last piece I forgot. Nirtza ends with next year in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't turn to the last page. That's why I didn't see it. There it is. Next year in Jerusalem. So you want to hit all the steps. And if your Nirtza is just next year in Jerusalem, which is Haba by Yerushalayim, all right, you are Yotze, that means you have checked that box. And also it's tired, and if people have to drive home, then they want to leave. And if they're kids, there's bedtime involved. So yeah, when I lead a Seder, I tend to say, okay, we're going to do Nirtza and sing Lashon Haba Abi Yerushalayim, and then if you want to leave, Geh Gesund, go in health. And otherwise we'll do 2 songs, and then if you want to leave after that, Geh Gesund, go in health. And then if you want to stay, we'll sing some more songs. But this provides exit ramps for people while still like doing things. I think I managed to do one of the years I did a speedy Seder, I managed to do the pre-dinner in 45 minutes and the after dinner in 15. But that's just about keeping things moving, not being like, what page are we on now? Having a plan, written out, okay, we go to this and then this and then this with page numbers. So a lot of Seder timing can be dealt with by just having flow organized. So yeah, those songs are not obligatory, but they are old and they are definitely part of the custom. Depending on what
carries some of the spirit as well of the.
Yeah, even the Reconstructionist Haggadah. My wife's family is Reconstructionist, and so when we go to her parents for Passover, her father has graciously turned over one Seder to me, so I can make it a shira-friendly one, and the other Seder he still leads usually out of the Reconstructionist Haggadah, and even the Reconstructionist Haggadah has Adir Hu, with a note about, we don't actually believe this stuff, but it was important to our ancestors, so we're going to include it, because Adir Hu is about rebuilding the temple. So it's definitely part of the experience for a lot of people.
You want to talk about some of the less Ashka normative traditions, like the whipping of the.
Yes. Yes. So there are. So the Haggadah is pretty standard for everybody. There is a Ladino version of Who Knows One, Quien Supiese, that is fun to do. But there are many other fun Sephardic traditions, such as there's a tradition from, I've seen it as either Algeria or Persia or Afghanistan, somewhere yonder, of whipping the person in front of you on their shoulders gently with either a green onion or a leek during Dayenu, as if simulating being whipped in Egypt. There is a Moroccan and Tunisian custom of putting the Seder plate on each person's head and then lifting it off and saying, you are now free. So like physically experiencing carrying a burden and then lifting that off. There is a Kurdish custom, Iraqi Kurdish custom, Jewish custom of children. Well, there's a general Sephardic custom of people dressing up and acting out leaving Egypt. The Kurdi twist on it is that the children leave the house, come and then knock on the front door, and you answer it, and they've got like a pillowcase and some stuff in it, and there's it's a ritualized set of questions. Where are you coming from? Coming from Egypt. Where are you going? Going to Jerusalem. And what do you have with you? And then the stock answer is matzah, but then you can also like make it an actual interesting activity by like bring something with you that you would take if you were leaving Egypt, or just a discussion for older kids or people in general about like, what would you bring with you? What are the 5 things you would take with you if you were leaving Egypt on your way to Jerusalem?
Mhm. Now that you're, oh, go.
No,
I
yeah,
didn't mean
go
to
ahead.
interrupt. I was going to say that you mentioned some of the Sephardic traditions. I just remembered that because for my wife, when we first started having seders, and even though she studied Hebrew as a modern language, still we got her a Spanish version of the Haggadah, and Sephardic, and some of the sequencing in the sections is not the same.
Interesting.
There's some differences. I can't give you the details now, but there are places where she says, wait a minute, this doesn't follow the Ashkenazi and the English translation, because hers is in Hebrew, and she uses many times as in Hebrew and Spanish rather than, and it was published by folks who are following Sephardic traditions. There's some slight variance, so we have to, wait a minute, it's over here. There's some slight differences there.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
At least in the version we have.
Yeah. Huh.
So what's your opinion of having the Seder on a different day because people come from Urbana and can't drive home and have to work the next day?
So I think there's power in having a Seder experience the same day as Jews around the world. There is nothing wrong with having 3 Seders. It's a lot of work. You could do a like pared down, we're going to talk about the story on the first night and like bring out all the fancy food on when everybody can be here together. I mean, some of the stuff theoretically you'd have anyway, like matzah, if you were eating matzah. So like you could do that. You could talk about the story. You could like have some of the discussion questions. You can make that your planning. Let's go through the Seder over dinner and like talk about what we want to do. That's sort of like a back way around it. But yeah, I would encourage you to have something to market, and then bring out the big guns for when everybody can be together.
I mean, there's no rule about the extent of the dinner, correct?
Right. No, there's no rule.
And there's nothing that says you can't have it 3 times or every night of the holiday or any other time.
Right. There's another custom, a Sephardic custom that has caught on in Israel. It's from Morocco originally, of Maimuna, which is right after Passover ends. You have this like big open house party, like the whole, like lots of people in the community do it. And you have sweets and bowls with coins as a symbolism for like prosperity in the coming 12 months. And like, it's a big open house party in the community. So kind of like what many people do of all going out for pizza right after Passover ends. And you might see other people at the same restaurant that you've chosen. But this is a custom that is gaining in popularity.
Right now,
Um,
also, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No,
interrupt you.
go.
No, I was going to say, mentioning that, I mean, when we had our congregation in Costa Rica, we had folks who, some who followed Sephardic tradition, and then we found that some of the foods that were acceptable were different.
Yes, key point. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up.
Rice and some of these other things.
Yeah, kidneyot. So kidneyot are things that could be confused for the 5 grains, but aren't actually the 5 grains. So rice, for instance.
Corn.
Corn, that would be the other big one. Soy, some people say. So Ashkenazi tradition has been to avoid kitniot. Sephardic tradition has been to say that's ridiculous. We're going to have them. And the conservative movement issued a tshuva, which is an answer to a question, looking at the whole matter and saying, well, this is silly. You should have kitniot. Okay, they didn't exactly say this is silly, but they said, we think that nonetheless, given all of the factors, conservative Jews should be allowed to have kitniot if they so choose. In Israel, I remember when I studied abroad their first semester at Hebrew U, that the supermarket shelves would be papered over with the things that you couldn't eat on Passover. But they would have things that were still available, like certain breakfast cereals that had a little note on them on the box that said, Le'ochle kitniyot. For those who eat kitniyot, you can have this. So
now it's the other way, right? We go up before the Seder every year. We go up to the Jewish Jewel. Where is that?
Evanston.
In Evanston. And they have stuff that says contains kidneyot.
yeah, right. That's true. In America, they do it the other way around.
We decided some years ago that we were unofficial Sephardim because if we couldn't eat that, I couldn't eat anything. So
Yep.
we were happy to hear the thing last year.
Yes. So yeah, kitniyot is a hot topic among some people, but something that you will see perhaps in your Passover research, Justin.
So I'm always curious about kashrut whenever you see, what is it, like baking powder that's kosher for Passover, because I feel like that goes directly against the I don't know, the feeling.
Yeah, there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the
Sodium
law.
bicarbonate. They don't call it baking powder.
Oh,
Baking soda.
Yeah. There's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. I mean, you can get kosher for Passover mixes for things like muffins, some of which aren't bad, cakes, cookies. There are recipes for rolls. I have not yet found a Passover roll that I enjoy as much as bread, but the muffins aren't bad. They're Passover cereals, which personally I like. I'm good with the granola and the Sunny-O's maybe, but the Crispy-O's not as much. I don't know, personal taste. I would not buy a lot of Passover cereal unless you have, like, I'd start with 1 box unless you're concerned that the supermarket's going to run out of it. But things like fruits and vegetables are fine. Cheese is fine. Meat is fine. You know, you eat one of these healthier paleo diets or whatever that are in vogue for a week. A lot of potatoes. Macaroons, on the other hand, I find to be tasty. Lots of different flavors now. So, and you know, they're still good after Passover if you don't make it through the whole canister in 1 week. Yeah. The other thing is that the hechsher, the kosher symbol, if you the most common one is an OU, which is U inside of a circle. And that just means that it is supervised by the Union of Orthodox Rabbis. But if it's kosher Passover, they will have a P next to it. The P does not mean parv, which means neither meat nor dairy, because by default, OU will be parv. They'll have a D or an M next to it if it's meat or dairy. But that's something that I was confused about for a while, what that P meant. Yeah. Other questions?
What about selling your
Yes, selling and finding. Okay, good points. Thank you. So before Passover, there is bidikat chametz, searching for chametz, which was traditionally done with a candle, a wooden spoon, and a feather. And now can be done with a flashlight and a dustbuster, or if it is chametz that you have planted so that you make sure you find something like Cheerios, then, you know, whatever you want. But flashlights are still fun to use. And so after you do bidikat chametz, finding the chametz, then you do bior chametz. That's the night before the first Seder. Then you do bior chametz, which is getting rid of your chametz, traditionally by burning, but you don't have to. And then you also want to sell your chametz, which is because you're not supposed to own any chametz. So so you can do this one of two ways. You can either find somebody not Jewish in your life and make a short little contract with them that says, like, from this day to this day, I turn over, or so-and-so has the rights to all of my chametz. And then they buy your chametz for you for like $1. And then at the end of the holiday, you buy your chametz back and give them back their $1. So you can just do that. Alternatively, you can sell your chametz through a synagogue like Har Zion to the rabbi, and the rabbi then sells everybody's chametz to somebody else. And then you can make a donation to the synagogue if you so choose. I tend to prefer the personalized approach. It makes it a little bit more like real, and you have to explain what you're doing to somebody else. But, you know, it is certainly easier to just fill out the form online and sell the chametz to your rabbi, who sells it to somebody. Yeah, there's also a fun passage in the Mishnah, possibly the Talmud, possibly the Gemara, about after your house is queen of chametz, what happens if a weasel runs in? And like, you don't know if the weasel has chametz or not in its mouth. And I think it ends up being dependent on like whether the rest of the houses around you have also cleaned out chametz, because if they have, then you probably don't have to worry about the weasel or the mouse having brought chametz into your house. But it goes down this rabbit hole for a while, and then it's like, okay, enough of this. This is ridiculous. But it's a really fun passage of Talmud to read. Other questions?
I've got another one that I've always kind of been curious about is whiskey or bourbon, generally made from a grain. Now it's been distilled out, so they're all whiskeys and stuff. They're always gluten-free because there's absolutely nothing in there. So I was just curious on the, kashrutness of having scotches or whiskeys in the house and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know. I tried looking that online just now, and I just got a lot of peach stuff instead of Pesach. So let me search again and see what, keeps giving me peach. Is bourbon kosher for Passover? There we go. Do. No. Rav, Google says no. Therefore, it is not kosher. That, yeah. And ditto with beer made from wheat, barley, spelt, rye, or oat. However, there is whatchamacallit, potato-based vodka that if you're desperate, you can find.
And also brandy is a good one, since it's made from wine usually. And
Yeah,
but I was
exactly.
just kind of curious because since they're like all gluten free, basic, or they're like people that are gluten intolerant can have it. I was curious on how that would work out. So
Yeah. No, it's a good question.
You're also not supposed to use vinegar unless you know that it's like from wine or something like that, because most vinegar is made from alcohol from grain.
Yeah.
In fact, I understand the red horseradish with the beets came from the fact that they used to make vinegar out of the beets, the beet vinegar to the horseradish, and that's why
Interesting. I did not know.
horseradish is red.
Huh. Cool. Thank you.
also, fun fact, if you have Marmite in the house, that is definitely not kosher for Passover because Marmite, it's usually like the Australian spread. I guess it's made from like
The dregs of the yeast.
It's yeast.
exactly for making beer and stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Oh, well, it
Oh, so-
tastes horrible anyway.
I had to get rid of it last year. So,
Unless you grew up with it.
yeah. Well, it's a good thing so my wife's vegetarian, so I use that for cooking to get a little flavors, but it's not kosher for Passover. So
Oh, it's one of the, yeah, I guess if you use a little of it, it's like fish sauce.
Fish sauce, right, which tastes horrible but makes things good.
yeah.
The idea of doing cleaning out your house, and that like many people starting from Purim, which is a month away from this Thursday, they stop like buying new chametz and just sort of eat up what they have. The idea of having to like clean out all of the old grain is credited with why so many Jews survived the Black Plague and then were blamed for it, because the rats that brought the bubonic plague were not as attracted to Jewish homes because they didn't have as much old grain built up over the years. So, yeah.
Also, speaking of that one, also with the traditional hand washing and all that stuff is also another reason that
Yes.
Jews were, or at least a theory on why they didn't get the bubonic plague, because washing your hands and cleanliness was already part of the tradition.
Indeed. All right. Other questions? All right. Well, seeing none, thank you all for joining me. And I look forward, Yochanan.
Sorry, but this is not related really, but what's tomorrow's topic for the Juniversity class?
So yes, for those of you who'd like to come on Monday evenings, we have learning opportunities, 8 p.m. If you're not on my list, let me know and I'll add you. Tomorrow is Tu B'Shvat, because Tu B'Shvat is the New Year for the trees, and it is coming up this week, I believe Thursday evening. So we're going to be talking about Tu B'Shvat and whether or not the Shema is a Tu B'Shvat prayer. So it's the second paragraph of the Shema that we're going to be looking at, but nonetheless, it'll be a good look at Tu B'Shvat, a good look at the second paragraph of the Shema, and then hopefully there'll still be time to talk about whether or not you actually think that they're connected in some way. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. And the next class for this is February 7th, and we'll be talking about God.
Super Bowl Sunday, I think, actually.
Yes, Super Bowl Sunday. I don't think the Super Bowl is 10:30 to 12, but nonetheless, hopefully I'll see you on the 7th, if not before. Maybe even
Thank you
tomorrow
very
night.
much.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you.
almost stupid shot, guys.
Thank you. Gute Woche.
Good talk.
David?
Yeah.
I was wondering, could we do like maybe a makeup class on Shabbat? Just I felt like I could use some more learning on Shabbat, and I know that we kind of went over it, but it was rushed because we were doing all
Oh, the
the
other holidays?
holidays and stuff too.
Sure.
If not, that's perfectly fine. I know that you're a very busy man. I was just curious if that'd be a
Yeah. Yeah. Let me think about when we can do that.
Okay. That's awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Hey. Well, hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming, Susan.
It wasn't. It was really interesting. And luckily I had a Haggadah to follow along with.
Oh, that is good.
So are there any texts that I should look into?
So every week I'll send out a textbook chapter, like a PDF of it. But probably the most useful book would be, it's called Jewish Literacy.
Okay.
By Rabbi Tolushkin, Joseph Tolushkin. We're not going to refer to it in this class, but it is like, but it's easy to understand. It's short explanations of a whole slew of things. And if you read that, you'll know more than a lot of Jews. And as you work your way through it, when you have questions, you should email me, and then I'll like explain things to you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
Thank you. Have a
See
good
you
day.
next time. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Oy vey. Really? Okay, I'm not sure that I want to. Yeah.
Are you done?
Finally, yes, I am done.
Okay, please open the door.
All right, hold on.
It's fine, please don't.
Yeah.
I just pooped.
You just pooped. Hooray! That's fantastic.
Oh, let's go.
Okay.
Tag my tail.
Tag your tail. You certainly did. I'm plugging my computer. Um, well, kiddo. Is it gonna be fun if we watch Going to Bed?
No.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Marshall's always been waiting.
Oh, eventually you will. Oh god. Get tall enough that your shoulder will not run the door.
Please get a video. That's time.